Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Wendy Wall. I'm the president of the Vancouver Island Strata Owners Association. Welcome to the third webinar in our series about electric vehicle charging in stratas. It's really great to see so much interest in this topic. I think you're really going to like today's webinar. You'll see 3 examples of charging stations, so do stick with me. On behalf of VISOA, I would like to thank and take a moment to thank the Lekwungen, Malahat, Chinook, Desauk, and Wasanich peoples on whose traditional territories we live and work. We also gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia through the Ministry of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation. What will we talk about in today's webinar? Well, we'll talk about the CleanBC rebates. We'll show you 3 examples of networked charging station systems. We'll go over what are the eligible costs for the rebates, the decisions that need to be made at an annual general meeting or special general meeting, and also how to apply for the rebates. So the CleanBC Go Electric program is administered by BC Hydro and FortisBC. And in general, it provides rebates towards the cost of installing EV charging equipment for multi-unit residential buildings and workplaces. So the information in today's webinar is accurate as of January 8th. When you're ready to get started, please check the program guide just in case any of the details have been updated. So let's take a moment for an overview of the 4 rebates that are available from CleanBC Go Electric. Our first webinar explained what an EV Ready plan is and the rebate for it. So in short, it's a plan, a feasibility study, and it presents one solution and budget to provide each residential unit in your strata with at least 1 EV Ready parking space. Webinar 2 explained the electrical infrastructure rebates that go up to $80,000. So essentially, your strata takes the EV Ready plan and puts it into action. After installing all of the electrical infrastructure, the electrical work is done and the parking spaces are EV ready. So that means they're ready for a charging station to be installed. Today's webinar focuses on the third rebate, the rebates for the charging stations themselves. So this rebate program is called the MURB Charger Rebates, where MURB, of course, means multi-unit residential buildings. So this rebate isn't just for stratas. Owners of apartment buildings could also apply. And then the 4th rebate, in February, we'll have a webinar that focuses on it. It's called the Single Family Home Charger Rebates. And why will we be doing that one? Well, because this rebate's available for strata owners who live in duplexes, townhouses, and bare land stratas. But if you're in those stratas, don't leave us yet. We have more. So let's talk about the MURB Charger Rebates specifically. Most stratas are going to be eligible for this rebate as long as they were constructed on or before August 31st, 2020. But not duplexes, townhouses, or bare land stratas where the owner has a dedicated parking space, like their own driveway, their own carport, their own garage. However, if a duplex, townhouse, or bare land strata has a parking lot or a common carport or common set of garages, the strata could consider putting charging stations in those areas and apply for this rebate. You're probably wondering, does the strata have to participate in the first 2 rebates to qualify for the MURB Charger Rebates? And the answer is no. So if your strata just wants to install 1 station or a few stations, this program can really help you. Your burning question is probably, how much are the rebates? So there's 2 situations. If your strata did not participate in the electrical infrastructure rebate program, the charger rebate program can cover up to 50% of the costs of the purchase and installation of level 2 stations, up to $2,000 per station. If your strata did participate in the electrical infrastructure rebates, the amount per station is a bit lower. It makes sense because you've already covered the cost of the infrastructure. So these rebates are still up to 50% of the cost of the station, but the maximum rebate is $1,400 per station installed. And there may be other rebates as well. So check the link on our website to see if your municipality is offering a top-up rebate. Now, dual port stations, a station like this with 2 charging heads, they count as 2 charging stations. So a dual port station like this could receive a rebate of up to 50%, up to $4,000. But again, in all cases, the maximum rebate per strata is $14,000. So one last detail, is your building quite new, perhaps built in the last few years? Your municipality might have bylaws that required the builder to make the parking stalls EV ready. If your building was constructed after those bylaws came into effect, the maximum rebate per charger is $350, up to a maximum of $5,000 per strata corporation. So this is where you really need to read the program guide carefully. What charging stations are eligible? They need to be new. They need to be level 2 charging stations, purchased, not leased, permanently installed, and they need to be networked for at least 2 years. Now, we'll talk more about networking in a minute. They also have to be installed by a licensed electrical contractor. So make sure you pick one with experience. Ask your contractor if they're EVITP certified. That stands for Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program. It's not mandatory, but it could be an indication that your contractor is keeping up with the current technologies, the systems, the products. If so, they can guide you through the options and help you choose the system that's right for you. So here's just a really quick overview if you're not familiar with electric vehicles. I'll quickly note that there are 3 levels of charging equipment. For at-home charging, we use level 1 or level 2 charging equipment. Level 1 uses an outlet, as shown on the right, and it takes quite a long time to charge a vehicle. Level 2 charging is faster. So on the left, you'll see that there's a level 2 charging head. It's attached to the charging station with a cord, and then beside it is a photo of where it actually connects to the vehicle. So to receive a MURB Charger rebate, you have to use an eligible level 2 charging station. There are many, I love this photo. There are many charging stations on the market, and it's not possible to show you all of them today. If you go to VISOA's website, you'll find a link to a BC Hydro lookup tool where they list 80 different networked chargers that are eligible for the program. And that list is not exhaustive. It's only meant to offer some assistance in researching brands and suppliers. So there's a lot of these out there. Please note that VISOA, the province of BC, BC Hydro, Fortis BC, do not endorse any particular manufacturer or product brand. So I'm not recommending any manufacturer over another. The 3 projects I'm showing today are just shown as examples of the diversity of the charging equipment and the various features that are available on the market. You could ask your electrical contractor or electrical engineer for their own recommendations. Okay, so let's start with our project example number 1. This is a wireless system. It's using charging stations made by a company called Switch. This strata got an EV ready plan and they received the infrastructure rebate. So all 37 residential parking stalls are EV ready. But not everybody wanted a charging station right away. So just 15 charging stations were installed. Now these parking stalls are designated limited common property. So each of those owners has exclusive use of those parking stalls. So here's the common property electrical room. There's a new electrical panel, and you'll also see there's a brand new BC Hydro meter, and it's been labeled EV chargers. This meter is only used to measure electricity used by all the charging stations. This is another wall in the same common property electrical room. The yellow arrow, number 3, is pointing to a black box that is called a network switch. And then there's a very small black box, you can barely see it there. It's called a power over Ethernet adapter. Now, you don't have to remember these things, but I just think it's interesting for you to see what they look like when they're installed in the electrical room. So in this photo, we can see piping, which is also known as conduit, and it was run from the electrical room to every one of the 37 parking stalls. 2 kinds of wiring were installed, wiring for the electricity and wiring for the communication system. So the wiring that's for the communication system is called Cat5 cable, and it goes to something called wireless access points. So here's what a wireless access point looks like, circled in yellow. For this project, 9 of these were needed, installed all throughout the parkade. Now, all of this equipment is to allow the charging stations to talk to each other. So it's called a communication system, also known as networking. So part of the reason for the communication system is load management. In this example, we've got 4 charging stations that share one circuit on the electrical panel so that they can share the electricity. The communication system allows the chargers to talk to each other. It tells each station how much electricity is available on that circuit, depending on how many of the 4 charging stations are being used at the same time. So I'm going to play a fun little video for you here. So in this diagram, we see that the circuit is delivering 32 amps. And while there are 4 cars charging, they each get 8 amps. Now that the gray car is fully charged, more electricity can be delivered to the remaining 3 cars. The higher the amperage, the faster the cars will charge. Now that the red car is headed off to work, the remaining 2 cars can get 16 amps each. And now that the green car is fully charged, all 32 amps are going to the blue car, and it will charge faster. So this installation took about 6 weeks. And as I said earlier, the Strata received the EV Ready and infrastructure rebates. They also received a MURB Charger Rebate of $14,000, which was towards the cost of the 15 charging stations. I'm going to talk a little bit about how things were structured in the bylaws. So the Strata created bylaws that say that the owner is responsible for the cost of the charging station itself. So the 15 owners paid for the remainder of the cost of those stations. The switch system doesn't require internet, and there is no service contract. So using the system, now that it's installed, how do you use it? Well, each owner has a key to unlock the holster to their charging station. And this is the most common question we get asked at VISOA: can the users be charged for operating costs like electricity? Yes, but the Strata cannot charge the user fee unless the fee is set out in a bylaw or a rule. So they can't start charging owners until after the bylaw is passed by a 3/4 vote, or the rule is ratified by a majority vote at an annual general meeting or special general meeting. So in this example, the Strata created a rule and ratified it at last year's AGM. One of the methods that the Strata Property Act and regulation allow for creating a user fee is by splitting the operating costs by the number of users. That is the method that these owners put into their rule. Since there's no service contract or internet costs, the only operating costs for this situation are electricity and the annual operating permit from Technical Safety BC, which costs about $500 per year. So the BC Hydro bill is received every 2 months for that meter, and all of these costs are divided equally and billed to the 15 users every 2 months. Switch, who are based in Toronto, offer a service that tracks the energy usage for each charger. So in the future, if Measurement Canada allows it, the Strata might consider changing their rule to calculate the user fee using a different method that's permitted by the Strata Property Act and regulation. Okay, now let's look at example number 2. This system is wired, not wireless. This is a small strata with only 13 residential parking stalls. They have not participated in any of the other CleanBC rebate programs, so the stalls are not EV ready. They're starting from scratch, basically. So for now, they just want one charging station, and it's located in a common property stall for shared use. They decided to install a system made by Variable Grid. And if you're looking for it in the lookup tool, it's called IBX Data Systems. So here's a picture of the charging station. It's beside the shared use stall. And as in the previous example, a new BC Hydro meter was installed in the common property electrical room. So here's a diagram that might help explain the components. You can see the electrical panel. Along the top indicates that there's electrical wiring. On the left by the electrical panel, it's very small, but you'll see that there is a sensor and a server. So these are installed off the panel, and Cat5 cable, which we talked about before, it's the communication wiring. It runs from the server to the parking stall where the charging station is installed. And this allows the charging station to talk to the server. This project only has one charging station, but you can see in this diagram that more charging stations could be added to the network. So that's why this diagram shows, as an example, 3. It's not limited to 3. So this is called an Ethernet, or a local area network communication system. So as I said earlier, it's a wired system, so it doesn't require internet, doesn't require a cellular network to operate. So this installation took 2 weeks. The strata received a rebate of $2,000, which goes towards the cost of all the equipment I mentioned, the charging station and the labor. But what happens when they want to get a few more stations? They already have the server, so their contractor will be able to connect more stations to that network. And the strata or the owners can apply for another rebate. In other words, there can be multiple applications for the rebate, but the total rebates for one strata can't exceed $14,000. Again, to use this system, each EV driver has a key to unlock the holster. In this case, the user fee is a little bit different. The strata decided to do their user fee using a flat monthly amount, which is a method permitted by the Strata Property Act and regulation. So here, again, the only operating expenses are electricity and the annual operating permit. In this case, it costs about $400. Variable Grid doesn't do any monitoring or offer other services, so there's no service contract. So in this case, the strata owners passed a bylaw by 3/4 vote at their last AGM that created a user fee that is a flat amount of $50 per month. So in the future, they could change the bylaw to increase or decrease that amount, or to use a different method to calculate the fee. If they wish, the strata can get data about the electricity consumption by connecting a computer, like a laptop, to that little server in the electrical room. This information might be more useful for them in the future when they've added more stations to the system. Okay, now we move on to example number 3. This is another wireless system, this time using charging stations made by Flow. This strata, again, did not participate in any of the CleanBC rebate programs, so the stalls are not EV ready. They have 100 residential parking stalls. The stalls are common property, so the council assigns them according to Section 76 of the Strata Property Act. So they're not exclusive use. Not everybody uses a stall, so there are a few extra stalls, and 6 of those stalls are going to be used for charging stations for shared use. So in addition to the new BC Hydro meter, a new electrical panel, this system also needed a transformer. Wireless access points, like we saw before, were installed in the parkade, but in this case, the Cat5 cable is not needed. So there's less wiring to do. And the reason is that the equipment creates a communication system that uses a cellular network. the charging stations actually talk directly to Flow in Toronto. So each charging station is sending data to Flow about the user. In this particular situation, each station is on its own 40 amp circuit. And at some point, the Strata will not be able to keep adding stations this way. They'll eventually need a load management system to handle a larger number of stations. This installation took 2 weeks. They received a rebate of $12,000 towards the cost of all the equipment I've mentioned, the 6 charging stations, and the labor. And if they want another station, they could apply for another rebate, but the total rebates for the Strata can't exceed $14,000. So using this system is a little bit different. To use the station, an owner has to go online and set up an account with Flow. Then they use a tap card, also known as an RFID card, to use the Flow charger at their Strata. But they can also use their card at any Flow charger around town or when they're traveling. The energy consumption is measured, but at this point in time, the owner cannot be billed by the kilowatt hour. And the reason is that Measurement Canada hasn't approved any charging stations to do this yet. But the billing can be done at an hourly rate. So this is one of the methods permitted by the Strata Property Act and Regulation for a user fee. So in this case, the Strata Corporation passed a bylaw by 3/4 vote at their last AGM that sets out a rate of $2 per hour. So Flow collects the money, they keep a percentage, and they pay the rest to the Strata. They also keep detailed reports. The hourly amount has been calculated to cover several operating costs. Flow charges an annual fee for each charging station, plus a percentage of the billings. And then of course, there's also the cost of electricity, and in this case, the annual operating permit from the City of Victoria. So those are just 3 examples, and you can kind of see how different the systems are. Now that you're familiar with some of the equipment, let's look at what costs are eligible for the rebate. So obviously the purchase of the charging stations, the labor and construction costs for the installation of the charging stations and things like the conduit that you saw in the photos, of course, by a licensed electrical contractor. Costs could include things like parking and electrical design, electrical and other permits, EV parking signage, and if there are contracts or costs for network connection fees, that cost can be included, but only for a maximum of 2 years. The rebate doesn't cover taxes paid on the charging stations and labor. It doesn't cover admin costs. So things like if you had to do photocopying or mailing costs to communicate with the owners, or communications between the manager and the council and the owners, those things wouldn't be covered. It doesn't cover painting of the parking area. Some of the Tesla chargers aren't eligible. There's quite a few details in the program guide, so please read it carefully and discuss the details with your contractor. So throughout this webinar, I've mentioned things that the Strata owners must decide on. So I'll go into that in a little more detail. In our second webinar about electrical infrastructure rebates, we talked quite a bit about the process of holding an AGM or SGM. Before you install any infrastructure or charging stations, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made, and they need a vote of the owners. So how will the work be paid for? Will the Strata pay for all of the work except the charging stations and require individual owners to pay for those? Or will the Strata pay for the stations as well? Will that be paid from the CRF or by special levy? Who's responsible to repair and maintain? Does the Strata want to charge a user fee to cover operating costs? What is the process in the future for requests for stations? All of these questions should be addressed and put into bylaws and rules. And as I said before, bylaws require a 3/4 vote of the owners. Rules require a majority vote. And even the funding from the CRF or by special levy also requires a 3/4 vote. So this is actually quite a large topic. So VISOA will be presenting a webinar that focuses just on bylaws, rules, and user fees. How do you apply for the charger rebate? Okay, so this program requires that you get pre-approval. Either the strata corporation or an owner or multiple individual owners can apply. If an owner applies, they need proof that the strata has approved it, and there is a form for that. However, in practical terms, I suggest it's best for the strata to apply. Certainly, if the decision is for the strata corporation to pay for the stations, then the strata must apply. But even if the bylaws say that the owner pays, it may be more practical for the strata to apply for the rebate. The strata is going to have better buying power to buy those stations. They may also start to get more familiar with the application process and the submission of the documents. And they're going to have to be involved in approving these anyway. Again, if there are multiple applications, for example, from individual owners, remember that the total rebates for one strata can't exceed the $14,000. So how do you do this? You apply online. To apply for pre-approval, you will need a copy of an itemized quote for the charger and installation from a licensed electrical contractor. The strata has to complete and sign a very short form, which is called the Charger Installation Approval Form. And then the contractor has to complete and sign a form called the EV Charger Consultation Form. The contractor has to fill in a bit of basic information in that form, such as the size of the electrical service, the electrical capacity, additional panels, and whether it requires additional panels and whether a new meter will be installed. So if you're a BC Hydro customer, look for this page on their website to start the application process. And when you get to the application form, it'll look like this. You would be choosing the third checkbox. It's called EV Charger Rebate. It reminds you the documents that you need to have ready. And then once this has been submitted, BC Hydro or Fortis will review it and send an email advising you of pre-approval. And that usually happens within 30 days. After you've received your pre-approval, you can purchase the number of stations that were approved, have them installed by your licensed electrical contractor, but you must complete the project within 4 months after your pre-approval date. Your contractor must make sure they meet all the requirements. For example, there's a requirement that the conduit, the piping, be oversized, at least 2 inches, and that extra conduit be run to all stalls or 30 feet into the parking area, whichever is less. There's also a requirement for junction boxes at intervals for future runoffs. So please read the program guide, and if you have any technical questions whatsoever, ask your contractor about them. When your project is finished, you'll submit your final paperwork. Again, you must submit these no later than 4 months after your pre-approval date. And you're going to need, you can't submit an invoice that just has a lump sum on the bottom. You need a detailed receipt or paid invoice for the purchase of the station. It has to include details like the Canadian dealer, their website, the retailer's name, address, phone number, the purchase date, the product, make and model, the price. You're going to need a detailed receipt or paid invoice from your electrical contractor for all the work they did. You might have a receipt or paid invoice for other eligible costs. And your contractor must complete another form. It's called the EV Charger MURB Contractor Installation Form. So BC Hydro or Fortis will review the documents. And if all is in order, they'll process the rebate within 90 days. You can learn more about electric vehicles and the CleanBC Go Electric program at goelectricbc.gov.bc.ca. And the CleanBC program also provides support. Your Strata Council can get help from an EV charging advisor. You just email them at this address. It's evadvisor@pluginbc.ca. We also have a page on the VISOA website that's called EV Charging for Stratas. So I hope you'll check it out. You can find all the videos from these webinars. You can see what other webinars are upcoming in this series, because I think there's going to be 8 by the time we finish. There's also quick links for you, so you can go quickly to the application forms, to the program guide, see rebates for municipalities, go to that lookup tool for chargers, and much, much more. You can also contact us by email at evcharging@visoa.bc.ca. I'd like to thank Lee MacFarlane from Edwards Electric for his help and his technical expertise in preparing the slides for today's webinar. And also thank you to the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, and to all of you for joining us today.